Welcome to iAMradio number 20-ish. I'm going to talk about healing today and how that might be applicable for you even if you didn't have like childhood stuff that you can name. And I'm going to talk about it through the lens of metaphysics, which isn't something I stuff it under everything I do because it's what's true for me, but I usually don't speak to it directly. I think that what I'm working through is the idea that it would be off-putting because it's so abstract and comes from such a detached perspective, but it's helpful for those same reasons. So I'm gonna add that to the conversation, even though I'm scared and I'm afraid people think I'm crazy or heartless, and I might be. Nevertheless, it works, and so I'll share that. I'm also going to talk a little bit about my own healing journey, and that's not really a word I love because in some ways it implies that you will, like there is a state of healed. And I don't necessarily know if it's healed that we're looking for so much as imperfect acceptance of ourselves. I find that, and this would be one of the metaphysical tips, maybe I should do a cool gesture. Not that one. I'll come up with one. But the metaphysical tip there is, whatever question you ask of life, yourself, and the universe. And when I say life, the universe, and God, to me, and consciousness, I'm speaking to the same body, the same complete system that includes all that is. And whatever question you ask, you're asking it. And it's like, oh, okay, Shaylee wants to know about this. Here's more information on where you're fucked up. Oh, Shaylee's asking the question, why is this wrong with her? Here you go. Here are some answers. So my first tip, metaphysical tip, is be mindful of how you're framing your healing. I would suggest, and this is, based on 5,000 hours coaching people, a bunch of hours studying, and my own stuff, I don't think anybody, even myself, knew how fucked up I was. So I'm speaking from that body of work. And what I wish I would have known and what I use now is look through the challenges that are coming up on your healing path and still towards what your ultimate objective is, which is relief, acceptance of self, acceptance of past, excitement of going forward. The question you would ask then is, what's here for me to appreciate? What's here for me to enjoy? What's here for me to do? It's different. It's a completely different experience than asking, what's wrong with me and why are things wrong with me? You'll get to the same answer, but the path is much different. And if you're asking the what's wrong with me question, perfect. If you want to try the other one, great. It's really your journey. What I found is it's kind of like coming out of all my opening up all my stuff, I'm gonna tell you what I really think and feel. The medical industry as it currently stands is to prevent death, not necessarily it's sort of organized in that way rather than to support life. Same objective, two different paths. So when we're talking about healing, when you're looking at what's wrong and why is it wrong, it's kind of like asking how do we prevent death, which is different, a different set of, you make different choices here than you make here. Here has a longer term game and is more sustainable and whole. So the healing question I would suggest to ask is, how can I love and appreciate what I've experienced? What's here for me to explore? What am I seeing? You'll get to the same place. but you'll save a lot of time and you won't make yourself as miserable. Living through the lens of like, what's wrong with me is not, it colors everything that way. So if you guys are just joining, what I'm talking about today is healing and how that might be applicable even if you didn't have specific childhood stuff. And the third point was, what it looked like for me, and there was something else. My metaphysical tips. And I'm open to a replacement cool gesture for when I throw out my cool metaphysical tips. So the first metaphysical tip I just talked about was be mindful of the question that you're asking as you explore healing. Why did those fuckers do that? Different experience then. How can I offer them compassion? You will get to the same place. This one is messy, this one not as much. So when I said that healing would be applicable to you, even if you don't have childhood stuff you're looking specifically at, our culture is set up in a way that encourages non-transparent communication and adherence to an idea of what somebody should be like and what life should look like. And sure, there are pockets of that, and you can see it when you look at the pockets. So if somebody grows up in a rural community, there is kind of like a general idea of what is important for they feel or find is important to focus on, how to interact with each other, what's appropriate as far as dress. There's like this is what it should look like. But if you take somebody from that community and you drop them in New Orleans, they're going to be accepted here because we take everybody. But it's not like like what's valued, what's normal, how do you interact, it's all different. And taking that idea that in the rural community a person might reject themselves because they don't match what everybody else in the rural community is doing, now take that same idea and put it at all of humanity, all of the global experience, where we have these ideas that we think have to be because we see them around us. But it's more of an agreement than it is like how it is. And so there's a lot more freedom and expression and life and functioning and being than you can even begin to imagine because you've never seen it. So I talk a lot about human design and gene keys. They're phenomenal tools. Totally recommend looking into them. There are free resources available. I'm a resource. What they do is help you see what you would function like naturally if you weren't corralled or conditioned. Human design uses the word conditioning to be other than you are. So an example of that would be human design speaks to 5 different types. I think of them like dog breeds. If you are a golden retriever, you're going to be different than a Chihuahua. Sure, there are variation within the breeds. Sure, there's a spectrum, but it's generally like this breed needs this much rest, this breed needs this much activity. So there are 5 different breeds of humans, and some humans do require more rest than others. Some humans can only handle so much interaction. Some humans love to be around people and thrive on constant activity. If you're looking at the people around you and saying like, what's right for me to be like, you might not see what's right for you. So without using those tools, you can start to get at that information, excuse me, a little bit more slowly by starting to pay attention to how you feel. So when we come back to healing, one of the things that people need to heal, and include me in all of this when I say people, is ignoring what feels bad and pushing down what feels good. And thanks for that note. pushing down or ignoring what feels bad. Okay, hold on. Guys, I'm working here. Okay, so we're trained to ignore what doesn't feel good to us. You might be trained to ignore that in your home. So let's say that your parents are volatile and they're not able to be aware of the impact that they're having on you, the child. That doesn't feel good to you, to the child, but what are you gonna do? Go get a job? No, you're there. So you learn to adapt to them. And you take that, it goes into your nervous system, into your cells. You take that and then you use it in your adult life in a way that fucks you over, because not everybody is that. But because you are trained to respond to certain stimulus like that, and you're not consciously choosing to respond to what's present, you're responding automatically, you cause problems where there are none. Hey. So that would be at the home, learning to stifle what feels bad to you. And so as an adult, what you're healing is being able to connect with, like, hey, I really don't like how that feels, or hey, like that's not good for me. You might also be trained away from that in the school system. Yes, I will get to that. That's great. Thank you. Is the audio okay for everybody else? I appreciate that. No, thanks, Chris. Can I get something on the audio before I go trucking around? Not that my hand gestures aren't great. Okay, thank you. I am gonna get puppets. That's my next move. I'm gonna teach this shit with puppets. Thank you. Okay, so you might be at the school system, like, coming out of all my here's what I think stuff. Oh my God. Coming out of all the think stuff. I'm not gonna look at the chat anymore. I gotta focus. Coming out of, okay, what I really think the school system has, in many ways, like, so even when I'm talking about the health system, if I talk about the government, the health system, media, finance, school system, I got shit to say about everything. I truly believe that there are people within them that, like, pretty much fill them out with good intentions and are trying to help. There's just a little misinformation or misguidance somewhere, and it doesn't quite achieve the aim that we want it to. So in many ways, the school system suppresses natural intelligence and aliveness in people by trying to fit them towards what is, like, smart, or what you're supposed to be like. That's not natural for a lot of people. That's not to be their contribution. Like, it's not built to support individuality. It oppresses it. Whether it's built that way or not, I don't know. And of course, you've got pockets everywhere where that's not true. La, 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 la. I don't want to overgeneralize or stereotype anything. What I'm pointing out is that a person may have to heal from their experience in school, and they might not recognize that they have something to heal. What they might have instead is a job that makes them feel like their soul's being sucked, and not feeling like they have a way out or around it, because they've been trained or conditioned to that model where it's like, hey, I sit in the desk and somebody tells me what to do and when I can go places and when I can't go places, and that shit is in your body. And so when there's an authority figure that says that has a position of power over you, it takes a lot to actually overcome the fear and make a step towards what is freedom. So when we're talking about healing, I said I was going to speak to what it actually looks like. What it looks like is fucking awkward. It is not. I wish it was. I tried to make it. It's not sitting at home watching YouTube videos and reading books, that helps provide context. Yes, you may. But it doesn't update your body. In some ways, yes. So epigenetics is an interesting derivation on the study of genetics, and epigenetics says that your environment influences how your genes express. And so that might be an environment like the world around you, or it might be the world within you. So perception creates a biological environment that tells your genes what to do. So if you're watching a bunch of violent movies, if you're watching a bunch of, aggressive media, what you do is create a perceptual environment in your... Did you guys come together? What is... Yeah, it creates an environment within your body. Perception is like... So when I say perception influences your biology, there's a great book called The Biology of Your Beliefs by Dr. Bruce Lipton. He's got a lot of material out there, and basically what on the ground it looks like, oh shit, there's a snake, and then your body's like, oh shit, there's a snake. So you perceived something, your physiology responded to your perception, and there is none. There is none. But your body doesn't know the difference to what you perceive. It goes off what you perceive. And in many ways it will, and this is part of what we get trained out of, that is a broader conversation, in that the body can pick up a lot of things that you won't perceive. So tying that back to where untraining, where somebody might have something, or healing, where somebody might have from the school structure, or going through the school system, is their body might perceive authority figures in a certain way, and they might not have, like, it would register as like, I won't survive. Like, it doesn't make sense. So one way to tell when you have something to heal is when you feel fear to do something where it shouldn't be that funny, or it shouldn't, gosh darn it. Truly, I do just want to have a comedy show. So should we just switch to that? Okay, so what I was saying is, you can tell when you have something to heal because your inaction or your reaction is it doesn't make sense relative to the stimulus. And so if there's a conversation that you need to have, but you're terrified to have the conversation, or you put off having the conversation, or you got all this shit lead up to the conversation, you have something to heal because it's a conversation. It's a conversation. And I had a lot around that to heal myself. And so what does healing look like? Maybe this will be the title of it. It looks fucking awkward. To heal looks awkward. The way that I found to overcome the fear to start to make those types of conversations safe is to be as on the ground as possible. On the ground means your mouth, like what you're speaking to, matches the actual experience that you're having. And so what we're generally trained to do is it's like, here is what you're... Oh, this is a good one. Can't wait for me. Okay, it's not that great. Okay, so here is a person, and one of the ways that they're trained, and one of the things they may need to heal, is the idea that what they say can't be what they really think and feel. So you may have learned this through a parent that's like, tell your grandma I think I saw this on the holistic psychologist the other day, this example, like, tell your grandma you really like the gift when you don't. So it's like, here's your actual experience. That's just stupid. What were you thinking? And what you're trained to say is much different. I've said this a bunch in my work too. If you watch 90s sitcoms, they're all about like, make sure this person doesn't find out this thing. Like, it's all about hiding your personal experience, which is super ineffective. Holy shit. When you really start to look at people in groups who aren't sharing their actual thoughts and feelings, and how much is lost in the system because they're thinking, how do I express this to them? And they're thinking, like, what are they actually meaning? It is the most wasteful thing. It will blow your mind. Just had a breakup where she couldn't have a conversation. Her entire deal was, I'm a bad communicator, and she identified that way, so she wouldn't do it. Yeah, identification is huge. And that is essentially what everybody needs to heal. And your identity, so this is when I go say like my cool metaphysical stuff, is we perceive ourselves to be separate from life. We perceive ourselves to be relegated to the physical form that we have, and there's a lot more going on. And so our identity as a human, our identity as an individual separate from all else, causes more suffering than anything else. And it's tough. Okay, so that's a great example. I'm really glad that you shared that. The other comments are, I totally relate to that. Fear of speaking their truth. My ex identified as a jewel pod, and I couldn't change her. Okay, not sure I get that one, but I bet all the other people on the bus will. So, so taking on the fear of taking on the identity, hey Jeremiah, of bad communicator, this is what I'm saying is like the awkward part of healing. So if Ray Dalio says this in one of his quotes, how is Ray Dalio as an actual human? I don't know, but this made sense to me. And so when I say that, how is he as an actual human? I'm mindful, and this is putting all my shit on the table, I'm mindful that if there's anybody whose name I recognize in the public sphere, like, I just put a little question mark next to it because of some of the other things I've seen. So I try not to take anybody's image at face value. Nevertheless, Ray Dalio has a book called Principles. It has some really interesting points, and he talks about this jungle that people have to cross to live an extraordinary life. And that's basically what healing is. You can stay with the idea, I'm a bad communicator, it's hard for me to have money, it sucks, I suck at this, I'm not this. You can stay, or you can go through the awkward jungle of healing and emerge on the other side with a really cool story, some scratches, but a lot of confidence, because once you've done it, once you've got through the jungle once on one thing, then the next time a jungle comes up, you're like, shit, but I can do this. So healing communication looks like, I started to say, it looks like being on the ground. When I first started to work on this, I would say things like, I know this shit real crazy, but here's what I really think and feel, and this is what I'm afraid of. I'm actually really scared to tell you that I think or feel this. You can do it in chunks too. So one thing that was really helpful to me, the hardest place for me, so I can sit up here all day long and say anything I want, like free as a fucking bird, but except for some of the stuff I'm coming out with, like the metaphysical, but in general, up at close range, I had a lot to unpack. So when I first started having close range conversations that were of a more like substantial variety, what I would do is, before the conversation, I'd schedule the conversation, which is awkward. Like I said, healing is fucking awkward. I'd schedule the conversation and say, hey, I need to talk to you about something. I think in Odysseus, or the Odyssey, if I talk about this, I should know, but some guy on a boat tied himself to a mast. So when they sailed past the sirens, which were these beautiful singing women that most sailors were like, let's get closer, and they crashed their boats, he was tied to the mast so he couldn't change what the ship did, and he had all his like shipmates cover their ears and stuff. So tying yourself to the mast is basically like, oh shit, I know this is going to be hard. I know it's terrifying to me, even though it's just a conversation. I'll make a choice to anchor that I'm going to do this. So I would schedule conversations like this. Hey, I want to talk to you about this later. Is that okay? In many ways, like that is starting to pattern or repattern healthy communication, because sometimes you do need an environment where both people can be present. And if they're going through some shit right now, maybe that's not the best time for them to help you do what's really uncomfortable for you. So it's got multiple bennies. So you schedule your uncomfortable conversation. I would make myself write notes out. This is all the shit I'm afraid to say. And then I'd sit across them and I would do a presentation and I'd say like, okay, I'm like, jump. And I would say something, and you start to see that the people that you're talking to aren't your parents. Generally, if you want to have this kind of conversation with them, it's like they're not, yes, everybody's looking through their own shit, but in general, it won't be as bad as you think. Thanks. So I would go through the list, and it took me so healing is fucking awkward, and it's not linear. It's like learning to walk. You ever watch a baby learn to walk? Like, shit takes time. They're not even once they get it, they tumble. So it took me a few times to be able to actually go through my whole list at one time. Now I can I just say whatever the fuck I want. It probably took 2 years for me to be completely transparent at close range. What's crazy about being transparent is you likely don't know that you're not. And some people are, but again, most of our cultural conditioning is around don't say what you really think and feel, and say this, and there is this idea of what is polite, what is correct, what is acceptable, and so people hold themselves to that standard, again, not recognizing there could be something else. So at the beginning of this, I talked about how if somebody grows up in a rural community, they have an idea of what's acceptable behavior, and they pretty much stay within that because they don't know you can't. There's that, but we have it at a collective level. So all of humanity is sort of operating under these unsaid agreements, or not, and all of humanity, I mean pockets, etc. But it's kind of this is what it looks like. But it doesn't have to look like that. It's just what we've seen so far. And, okay, does anyone have any questions before I go further? Thanks for the, most people won't do it, or they make sure they have a shit ton of stuff to do so they won't have to have those convos. Yes, okay, and so what I found is that it might have been easier for you than for others. Or, with things I've seen from you that you post, I recognize you got some depth over there. So maybe you did the work to come to that. Maybe they don't have that. So one way I found to work with people who I can tell, and it's so easy once you're present and honest with yourself, when you're not busy hiding, you're available to be present to someone else. When you're present to someone else, you know if they're not. And they're not if they're thinking about what they're supposed to say, or if they're afraid, or if these things. You can watch people go away. And the first step to being able to do that is make sure your shit ain't doing that. And you do that by learning to control or lead your nervous system or your physiology through breathing, or that's one way to do it. So in that example, if you're with somebody and you know that they're not giving it to you the way that it is, you can take a deep breath. and reflect back what you heard in a non-threatening way, because when I was saying about metaphysically how we're all one and that separation is an illusion, it's to everyone's benefit. Like, the people that are in darker than others, which means they have a harder time seeing, and seeing would be like, what's actually happening? Who am I? How am I affecting people? What's going on? If they're really deep in there, you can't get them out by yelling at them to come out. It just makes them go in deeper. So it's like, create a safe space by not judging them. Shit, they're doing the best they can. If they could do better, they would do better, because it's, with a lot of this stuff, it's like the jungle that I was talking about. You have what's comfortable, what the awkward part, that's really uncomfortable, and then freedom. This is true for most things. So when you haven't crossed through the jungle and you haven't felt the other side, it seems like, why would you go in the jungle? So it's like, you see that with unhealthy eating, where on some level they know, like, maybe I could be eating in a different way, or this doesn't really feel good in my body, but it's more comfortable to stay here than be awkward and make mistakes and go over there. So I coach a lot of people through jungles, their own little jungles. The way to get somebody to feel good about going into the jungle is to let them feel good about where they are. It's okay. Like, wherever you are is okay. It's nobody's fault. It's not your fault. It's not their fault. In truth, like, it just is. And so letting it be okay that this is where somebody is starting, by accepting them for being that. Do you have to invite them to everything you do? No. Do you have to heal them? No. Do you have to give them quarters? No. Like, you don't have to do shit for them. But you also don't have to judge them. And judge them is like, again, it's basically saying you should be here. Maybe it's not their time. And to get yourself to go through jungles, that's the way that I was able to do it. As you can tell, like, I got all kinds of horsepower, and I could argue myself every which way about why I got to go do something. The only thing that worked for me in going through, like, the biggest, baddest jungles is accepting that I didn't want to. Accepting that I was scared, accepting that I was uncomfortable and I didn't trust myself, accepting that maybe this would be the way it is forever. As soon as I wasn't resisting where I was, then I was like, oh shit, okay, let's go. Pack the cooler, let's go. And being kind to yourself that's what freedom really is. So it's not like you go through one jungle and then you're there forever. It does seem like there are some states that stick. You can trigger genetic mutations that allow for your consciousness to sit at higher levels. So it does seem like there are certain breakthroughs or like clearings that are, I want to say final, but they're a little different than on the general path. So it seems like what you're trying to get to, or what one would be trying to get to in going through the jungle, is relief, acceptance, happiness, etc. And when you pull that to the front of the jungle, it like closes the gap, and it makes going through the jungle easier. And it also is more true because there's no final state. And that's what I was saying about healing. When you use the word I'm healing, in many ways it's like, once I'm done with this, then I can go live. No, motherfucker, like, your whole life might be that. And that was another thing I had to accept, where it's like, I pretty much pushed, like, almost everything I had off, and divinely, like, no judgment, aside. And I was like, I'm just gonna fix myself. Again, had a lot to do, was asking the wrong questions, made it longer, made it harder. But I didn't need to shut down the rest of my life. It was like when Willy Wonka closed the factory. It was like, to get the factory up and going again, Jesus Christ, it was hard. And so I do recommend, like, it's okay to have the factory going. You're going to be living the whole time you're healing. There's nothing to wait for, like, nothing to, like, you're not going to get to the promised land, after the next seminar. You'll get to a more comfortable place within yourself, but there's just jungle after jungle after jungle. And that's another thing I learned, is in the healing work, it's layered. So you get under one thing and you're like, yeah, and then you bump into something new and you're like, fuck. So it comes in layers, which is great, because to do it all at once would probably blow your mind and not really be functional. So one of the things I wanted to talk about was, sorry, there's a lot of notes, I'll come back to these, is, okay, so metaphysically, like, when somebody changed, like, what does change really look like? It is not, okay, like, I changed and now I am less angry. When you change something like that, like, okay, so a person becomes less angry, like, that's their objective, or that's their result. There's a bunch of other stuff that changes with I'm less angry. If you really let that be your new change, who you're with, how you respond to them, what you're attracted to, like, when you really change, it shifts your whole world. And so going back to the jungle, it's like, if I become a better communicator, that means I can't hide in relationships where I feel like a victim, which means I might have to go do something that's brave, which means I might have to go attempt what's in my heart. It's like, we keep problems because when you change a fundamental or heal a fundamental portion of yourself, the rest of your world goes with it. And that can be really scary. A lot of friendships can be built. I must have lived between 6 and 12 lives in just this one, where it's like, here's my world, here's my people, here's who I am, this is what it is. And then it'd be like, no, here's my world, here's my people, this is, you define yourself based on your surroundings until you don't, because there is no definition. And so my personal journey has been one to see, like, change is continual. That's the essence of who we are. And it's not getting somewhere, it's the going. Like, you always be going, and you're just going here. People can feel when they're being judged. Yes. Being genuine is crucial in acceptance of someone. Yeah, and it's like, if you can accept yourself, then it's a lot easier to accept others. When I'm with clients, I don't know if you've seen, I post, when I do reviews, a lot of what they say is like, I never felt judged. Have you seen the shit I seen in my personal life? It really, like, it humbles you out. Because I wouldn't, like, I really appreciate each person's individual journey and all the wrong shit they're doing right now. Wrong. Because I know in some way it's right. And it is, period. And there's nothing, we really don't know how things play into each other. Some of, like, the worst people in my life were the most influential in that they inspired or pushed me to grow. Do you need an asshole to make you grow? I hope not. I don't think so. Like, and yet we all play those roles for each other. However, in our little hero protagonist view, from our hero protagonist viewpoint, we're never like, oh, cool, like, off to be the villain at work. No, we're like, hey, I'm going to really push everybody today so they do great. And then everybody's like, here it comes. We can't see ourselves. And everybody's living out their own individual story. And you get cast in whatever role they need for their plot to continue. And their plot is a function of what they were patterned as children as. So you get, like, these little fractals. And it probably goes back, like, this is just keeping it in the human frame, saying time is linear, which I don't think it is. But if you get these, like, fractals, and it's like, Shaylee needs something to escape. So I go through life creating scenarios through my perception where I have to escape something, or I have to triumph over something, or I have to prove this or that. So the landscape is neutral. It's like getting a prop box and, like, what do I want to play with the props? So it's like, well, Shaylee wants to play warrior. Shaylee wants to play victim. So I get out the props and I play that. I could play fucking anything with it. And your perception is patterned in your early environment, and it doesn't, even if you have like loving, like let's say, so going back to your parents were like vocally loving, they did all the right things, they knew what the right things to do were, and they did all the right things. If they didn't feel good about themselves, this shit is a vibrational experience. You are patterned and trained to the vibrations around you. And so even if your parents were angels, we're living in a world, like if you turn on the news, which like I got some thoughts on all that, it drags your, like you're patterned in this like fear-based culture. So when did I start? How did I start that? Oh, so even if your parents were these loving things, like I saw somebody comment on Facebook the other day, how is it that I have such high anxiety when I have no trauma that stands out as a child? Because you're fucking alive on earth. And this shit's crazy. It doesn't make any sense. The way we approach life, like it doesn't make sense. And a lot of people I know who are sensitive, and by sensitive I mean they can take in a lot of information and synthesize it, they feel like something's off, and sometimes that prevents them from participating. It's like, I'm not going in there, that feels weird. And there is like a real job. So they live like outside of the system, thinking that there's something wrong with them, that they can't function, but they're just sensitive to the system's fucked. That's really what I think I feel. So this is a big day for me, coming out and saying all this stuff, because when I talk to it, it's really important to me. I never want to make anybody feel bad or wrong in participating or living out. I don't know what's right or wrong for anybody, and I'm in total acceptance of where they are and what is. I'm only saying from my vantage point, it looks like things aren't quite what they're portrayed to be, and in such a way that can cause discomfort or dis-ease, because if a person is like, hey, wait, that doesn't seem right, they're able to sell those chemicals and foods, like, but they might not be present to that. They're just sensitive to like, this feels off. Well, a lot of our world is built on offness. It's oppressive. It's so oppressive in ways you wouldn't even imagine. And that took a lot for me to digest. So on my own healing, it really, like, it encompassed things larger than myself, because I was really asking for like, how do I help? And so life was like, let me show you where the shit is. And so I saw things on my own, not from YouTube videos, and there's nothing wrong with that either. It's just like I actually got to experience and work through and feel and see where things aren't what they seem. Peace. I just surrender and let life happen. Stay calm and focus on being your best self. Others may be going through issues, but you can only control yourself. Be kind to yourself and others. Yes. Let yourself shine. Others will notice and you'll live your best life. Yes. So Dwayne, thanks for adding that. So I did find that, like, ultimately that's what it rolls up to, where that is the only thing you can do. So having been exposed to these things where I'm like, hey, this could be better, I was like, that's my responsibility. How do I fix it? I took on all these things I couldn't possibly do as one individual, and it's not my job. It was, like you're saying, my job is to be alive, and aliveness inspires aliveness through the ask that it ignites in the other, and we each have the individual intelligence to evolve towards that. When we're asking, how do I do that? How do I become alive? From what I've found, it seems like it's not that I teach. Like, a lot of what I had to overcome too is this idea, like, I have this information, I need to get it out, I need to tell people. It's like, no, people know. There's nothing I'm saying that other people couldn't access on their own. And it's not even that they hear me say it, that it's theirs, as much as like I'm alive to it, and my aliveness catches. The other day I asked, why do people watch my stories? And most people are just there because it was me. I was like, cute, like I'm slaving over here trying to put together information that I think is actionable, but it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter, because it's information this is only one way information is transferred. You can get it directly. A lot of the things that I'm talking about, I got directly and then bounced it off the world around me. And I was like, oh, wow, I'm not crazy. Like, other people are saying this. Science is saying this. Like, it's in other things. So when I'm working with clients, I'm really emphasizing like, yo, you don't need to learn the way you think you need to. And that's also going back to the school system idea. We're conditioned to think that if we want new information, we have to get it from the outside. I'm really putting it all out there today. Everyone views as a whole other being in their mind. I think you're saying everyone views themselves. Everyone views as a whole other being. I'm sorry. Darn it. I'm sorry. I'm having a hard time picking that one up. I might be going too fast. Jay, I wish I could pick up where people are like you. It's a gift. It's only after I reflect I say, oh, I missed an opportunity. Well, that might be like perfect timing. Like, so missing an opportunity, that might be a story. Maybe you can tell a different story and see what happens. So that would be one of my like metaphysical tips. So going back to the idea that somebody says, I'm a bad communicator, I can't. Yes, there are features of our experience that are seemingly fixed. Like I have challenged thinking strategically. Like my brain isn't wired that way. And I've tried it the other way, like I can. So I want to honor what you're sharing, and that it may be that that's true for you, where you notice late. It might also be possible that you could start telling a different story and see. So what if you allowed that, I am right on time with opportunities? Like, what if all the ones I missed were perfect and now I'm like ready for the right, There's a way to start to tell a story about what is that might influence your experience. So that's another, when I'm talking about metaphysical, thanks for coming in. When I'm talking about metaphysical, it's basically recognizing, remember, like when I was saying about the fractal patterns. So what I learned was like, hey, oppressive family environment, like it was bad, it was chaotic, like, violence, like so I learned that this is what the world is, and then I go to the prop box and I'm like, okay, how do I live out this story? It's not that the world is that, and like, sure, you can see things like that, but that didn't have to be my experience, except for that I thought from the vantage point that that's how it was. So if you can change the vantage point from which you're thinking from, which is identity essentially, then what you do with the prop box changes. And so when I post that little graphic, how the book works up here, and like that's how these things move, it's because identity, your state of consciousness, how you identify, I am this, I am that, changes. Like when you really feel it in your body, changes what you do when you get to the prop box. And so you might, if you show up to the prop box with the identity, it's hard for me to make money, then you live out that story with the prop box. If you convince yourself, like, I'm not that bad and I'm getting better, what you do with the prop box changes. And so you have this, not control, but you can have this leadership over your experience by being aware of how you're identifying. And the work that I do with people is mostly around like, you only think that you're not. So the mind is so trippy. Language is very limiting. You can take something like, I've used this example before, but if you, let's say someone says, I'm not being productive right now. Well, shit, rest is generally essential before or after periods of productivity. So if rest precedes productivity, isn't it part of productivity? And so when you're resting, are you being productive? And yet a person will beat the shit out of themselves for not being more productive when they're resting. And it's a word, it's a concept. So there are like when we're telling a story, I'm this, you're so fixed on the language and how you're using it that you can't see that you're probably not that. It's wild. It's wild when you start to look outside of how you call yourself. and the challenges you think you have. A lot of people that I know who are expressed very confidently, like they must be confident if they do these things, don't think that they are, because they have one area that's challenging for them. So they might take that they're uncomfortable in communication and say, I'm not confident, and then go do some crazy shit like that would require confidence. So there is, when you are calling out things in yourself, and this is part of where healing is ironic as well, because you can go ham on trying to fix something that's not a real problem for you. So like, I went ham on trying to fix how I related to people. I was pretty fine. I was pretty okay. But because I thought there was something wrong, that was the experience that I had. Hey guys, pretty good guys. Okay, it's so great to have so many people in here chatting amongst themselves. Just kidding. No, I'm glad you're here. All right, I want to cut this now because I've been talking for a while. So in recap, I talked about healing and being mindful of calling it that, and being open to exploring it from a question standpoint that is more aligned with where you're going than what you think is wrong or where you think you shouldn't be. So that's the same as saying like, I suck at this, I suck at closeness because of this. What's wrong with me? This is who I am. It's like, I'm excited for the coming intimacy. I'm excited for the opportunities I'll have to share who I am. Like, when you are pointed at what is wrong, why am I this way? Why is that fucked up? You will take that and put it on the big screen in your head, and the big screen in your head dictates how you feel. How you feel dictates what you do. What you do dictates what you like. It creates this feedback loop, and that's essentially spiraling. You put something on the big screen in your head, that's the wrong question. And then life is like, sure, more. Oh, you want to know why nobody likes you? Sure, here you go. And it's just a tiny tweak, but it makes all the difference. I talked about what healing looks like in real life. It looks awkward as fuck. It looks like taking, it looks like taking risks. It looks like looking like a fool, except that you really don't. That's another thing where you think you would, but it's really fucking brave. And like, we're all out here trying our best. So anybody that has the balls to be like, I'm gonna be a fool here, I'm gonna be awkward, everyone else is like, oh, thank God, you know? And maybe they're not at their place yet. That's fine. It doesn't matter. It's for you, ultimately. And I talked about, the metaphysical side. And thanks for being here today when I opened up to say, like, these are some other things that I look at. These are some other things I see. And again, never want to villainize anything, because I don't think that ultimately allows for, again, what's the end state? When you're focused on an enemy, when you're focused on a villain, are you with where you're trying to go? No, you're not. So it's really, I think Buckminster Fuller has, and he's got some interesting ideas. He has a quote that says, and I think probably Socrates or somebody does too, the gist is like, forget what is, like, build the new. So when we're looking at the systems that aren't working, we could talk about them till we're blue in the face. Won't do shit. But what we can do is, like Dwayne was saying earlier, take ownership of ourselves, become the best that we can, and ultimately build the new world. So in my profile for a while, I had like build the new world as one of the tags. And that's what we're doing. All the people who are breaking down the ideas of what was in their life and making a new choice, they're demonstrating a way to be other than what is. And people learn through modeling. So you have somebody over here at work who's saying, I can't take that on right now. It's my son's birthday. The other person who was terrified to like ask to have lunch is like, oh, you can do that? And so you spread freedom by demonstrating it yourself, and you come to own it when you've given it to yourself by walking through the jungle of like, oh, there's nothing to be afraid of here. And you claim your freedom, you live your freedom, you spread it. We'll all end up dead anyways, pretty much. Love your discipline. And thank you. As each day is a blessing, live our best selves. I will say, like, again, in pointing out the power of the big screen, I learned to do that because I wasn't. And it seems like, the more, it does seem like if things are really bad for you, they can also be really good for you. If things are like mildly bad, they can be mildly good. So if things are really bad for you, that means, from my vantage point, you're connected to a lot of horsepower, and you just got to learn how to like angle it. So in a lot of my work, I talk about X-Men, we kind of mutate. You can do this cool thing, but before you learn how to do it consciously, you're like burning, the plates at home, and you're, scaring the neighbor's dog. But when you learn how to use your superhero power, you can do a lot of good. And the way to come to that side is really to learn to love that you're scaring the neighbor's dog. You see it, you love it, you appreciate it, you accept yourself, you accept you're willing to take more risks because you love you, and growing is helpful to you, and you know it, and you will be. But it starts with accepting where you are and loving who you are. Thank you so much for coming out tonight. It's been a pleasure. If there's anything I talked about that really resonated, or you'd like me to go into in greater depth at a later date, let me know. There are 20-some episodes of iAMradio now on my IGTV, which is a little triangle on my profile in the middle above the grid. And I also have them on youtube.com/The Shaylee Show, which with a ton of other, I think there's over 100 videos there from over the years now. And you can kind of see like the evolution of like, and that's why I leave it up, because that's what it looks like. That's what it fucking looks like. And if I can at least demonstrate that change is possible. Thanks so much for coming in, your participation. I appreciate it. Then great, I've got a bunch of things I'm offering right now. I started to emphasize louder that all the work that I do, the workshops, my coaching, I invite people to pay as they can. I think this is really important work. If I free somebody who frees other people, like fucking A. And if cost is prohibitive from getting, like if what I do resonates with you, you feel like I can help you, I have space for it, like, fuck yeah, let's do it. Like, I don't want cost to be prohibitive to the world being a nice place to be. It's kind of why it is, So I'm emphasizing that. You can book me on heal.me or through the link tree in my profile. I also have an awarenting workshop that I've been promoting, which is like, hey parents, let me teach you how to accept and love yourself as a parent so you can model what that looks like to your kids so that they're not in self-rejection as an adult. And I also have a few things in my shop. I designed these cards, and they're tarot, and they're basically, it's kind of how to read the energy that's around you. So let's pull one. So we exist in an energetic field. It's cute to think it's just like these solid shapes like bodies, but they're not even solid. It's just an illusion of solidity. And you can train. I have this gift. I have a lot of friends who have opened to it and developed it as well. You can know things. Like I said, information doesn't just come the way we've been trained. It comes like you just know shit. And if you start to develop that, you can use it to discern things that are non-physical. And this is a tool to do that as well. So, oh man, I pulled this one 3 times in the past 2 days. I forget what it means. Let's look. So I designed them, had them printed, and then I've been going through and kind of writing out what comes to me on them. The Dance in Bloom, love. I think that's all I have written for this one so far. think it's about arrival. So letting you stand in, like they have the little disco floor. There is like union or wholeness of balanced energies, the bloom in the back. It's sort of saying like assume the finished state. And that is another metaphysical tip where if you're saying going back to the prop box, where if you go up to the prop box and you say, how do I become confident? Then you live out the question from I'm not confident. And so your experience, your I am state, your identity is I am not confident. And so it's like putting makeup on not confident versus if you pretend as if you were confident or practice feeling what it would be like if you were confident. When you go to the prop box, you don't ask that question, you build on it. So if I was confident, what would I attempt to do? And then when you go to the prop box, you're like, oh, then I get to do this. All right, thank you so much. Great to see you. If you have any questions, let me know. Please like, share, save, whatever, subscribe, do the things. It does help me with the algorithms, and only if it's, sincere. I would love to connect with people who this would be useful information for.